Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Today we're going to be talking about a case that I find truly bizarre. When I was first researching the case, I could not believe that this was real life. Everything that happened in this case is so insane, it's so bizarre, and to this day, I still don't understand how this actually happened. It is a very traumatizing case, so I do want to put a trigger warning out there because we are going to be talking about sexual assault. We're going to be talking about how an 18-year-old girl working at McDonald's was strip searched by her manager and her manager's fiance. I'm telling you, you're gonna be so confused throughout the video, and there's a lot of information to go over, so let me cut this intro short. Thank you guys again so much for being here and for listening to today's case. Don't forget to stay tuned until the end of the video to hear today's Familia feature, and with that, let's jump right into today's video. On Friday, April 9, 2004, 18-year-old Louise Ogborn pulled into the McDonald's parking lot in Mount Washington, Kentucky to begin her shift. We don't really know much about Louise, but we do know that she enjoyed attending church, she was a former Girl Scout, and she was someone that was highly disciplined. She grew up in a typical military-style home, and her parents taught her to always obey authority. If her parents asked her to do something, Louise would do it, no questions asked. If other adults told her to do something, she would obey them as well. That's just the type of person that Louise was. She was a very good, well-behaved girl. She never had a speeding ticket. She's never been arrested. She never had any type of issues with the law. She was a good person who had never even stolen a pencil. After graduating from high school, she planned on attending college, but before she could do that, she needed to find a job. Unfortunately, her mother was dealing with some health issues, and that resulted in her losing her job. So because Louise loved her family and she wanted to help them out financially, Louise decided to put college on pause and go find a job to help her family. That's when she came across an opening at a McDonald's to work as a cashier. Louise applied for the position and she was immediately hired. Louise was getting paid $6.35 an hour to work at this McDonald's, and I know it's not much, but at least it's something. The main reason Louise got this job is because she wanted to help out her family, so she was always willing to take on extra shifts and she was willing to work as much as possible just to get that extra money. That Friday night, Louise planned on just working in the morning and then going back home later that night. However, as the day progressed, the restaurant got busier and busier. It was a Friday night, so I guess a lot of people wanted to stop by McDonald's and have some dinner. Things at the restaurant started to pick up, and that's when 51-year-old assistant manager Donna Summers asked Louise if she would be willing to stay for the dinner rush. Again, Louise was always willing to pick up an extra shift just to get some extra money, so she told Donna that yes, she would stay and help with the rush. She told Donna she was gonna go on break, have some lunch, and then she would clock back in and work until things calmed down. The day continued and things at the restaurant just continued to get busier and busier. Louise was working up front as a cashier and Donna was working as the manager, so she was running around the restaurant, making sure that her employees were okay and that things were running smoothly. As Donna is running around the restaurant, she gets a call. Donna picks up the phone and on the other line is a man that identifies himself as Officer Scott. Officer Scott tells Donna that he's a police officer with the Mount Washington Police Department, which actually was just a mile up the road from the McDonald's. He tells Donna that he's a police officer and that on the other line he has the manager of McDonald's and a corporate representative. The three of them were talking because there was a serious situation. A customer had called the police and filed a complaint against one of the employees at this McDonald's. This customer claims that she went there to buy some food and that one of the employees stole her wallet, which had $50 inside. The customer wasn't able to get the employee's name, but they were able to get a brief description of what the employee looked like. They described her as a petite, blonde woman who was working at the front and was wearing a tie. As soon as Donna heard the description of this employee, she immediately knew that this was 18-year-old Louise Ogborn. She was the only employee working that night that was blonde, petite, was working the cash register, and was wearing a tie. There was no one else that Donna could think of, so she tells Officer Scott that she'll be right back, and she walks out onto the main floor and grabs Louise. She tells Louise, "You need to come back to my office with me right now because we have a situation." The two of them walk back to Donna's office, which was this very tiny and cramped room, and Louise gets there and she asks Donna what's going on. And that's when Donna fills her in on the situation. As soon as Louise heard that she was being accused of theft, she immediately denied it. She told Donna that she should know her better. She had been working at this McDonald's for the past 4 months, and in those 4 months, she had never gotten in trouble for stealing. She never stole any food. She never stole any money. I mean, a customer had never even once complained about her. So to think that someone was accusing her of stealing $50 just sounded completely crazy to Louise. She told Donna over and over again that she didn't do this. Maybe the customer was lying about the situation, or maybe the customer had confused her with someone else. But there was just absolutely no way that Louise had done this. She needed this job. Her mother was sick and she needed this job to help the family make money. So why would she risk this job over $50? And after explaining this to Donna, Donna kind of agreed with her. I mean, it's true, Louise was a very good employee, and in the past 4 months, there had never been any complaints about her. So Donna figured, Louise was telling the truth. So she grabs the phone again and tells Officer Scott that Louise didn't do it. However, Officer Scott disagrees with her. He tells Donna that this is a very serious situation and that both the McDonald's corporate representative and the manager have agreed that this needs to be taken seriously. He said, "Louise has 2 options. I can either go down there and arrest Louise and bring her down to the station to question her, or to avoid the situation, you can help me by conducting a strip search on Louise." Those were the only 2 options. And Officer Scott was telling Donna that it would be way easier if she just conducted the search herself. He was like, "Listen, let's save Louise from any embarrassment. I'm sure she doesn't want to be arrested in front of her coworkers and in front of the customers. So I think it'd be easier if you just do the search yourself, prove us wrong, and then we can put all of this behind us." And that made sense to Donna. In her mind, I'm sure she was thinking, yeah, I would rather avoid having police come down here and cause a scandal, so I'll just search Louise, we'll prove that she's innocent, and then we'll be done with it. So she agreed to do the strip search. The search begins, and while all of this is happening, Officer Scott remains on the phone. He's basically telling Donna how to conduct a strip search and, giving her a rundown of what's about to happen. He tells Donna that the first step is to make Louise empty out her pockets. Maybe she's hiding the wallet in her pocket, maybe she has the $50 in her pocket. Now, mind you, this entire incident was captured on CCTV footage. There was actually a camera inside of Donna's office, so you can go back and watch this entire thing unfold. So Louise starts emptying out her pockets and she's placing things on Donna's desk and is telling her, "Look, there's literally nothing in here. I don't have the wallet and I don't have the $50. Donna tells her, "Okay, let me just go look through your bag just to make sure the wallet isn't there, and I'm sure this will all be over soon." She goes, she grabs a bag, she looks inside, and it's empty. She doesn't find anything. Donna walks back to the office and she tells Officer Scott, "Listen, we searched her pockets, we searched her bag, there's nothing here, this is all a big mistake." And that's when Officer Scott tells Donna that maybe Louise is hiding the money inside her clothes. Maybe she's hiding it in her shoes, in her socks, inside her bra. Officer Scott tells her, "Just to make sure that Louise is not hiding any of the money inside her clothes, let's make her take her clothes off." Now, when Donna hears this, she's taken back. This is an odd thing to request, and I'm sure Louise was thinking the same thing. No one wants to take their clothes off while they're at work just to prove that they didn't steal $50. But this is what Officer Scott was telling them needed to happen. It was either Louise takes her clothes off here in front of Donna, or she gets arrested and has to do it down at the station. So again, Donna feels like doing all of this in her office and at work is a way better option than Louise doing it down at the station, so she agrees. She goes and grabs another employee named Kim Dockery, and she tells Kim to come back to the office and help her with the situation. Donna wanted there to be another witness to this strip search. That way it wasn't just her in this room by herself while Louise takes her clothes off. This way there was a witness to the strip search, and maybe this would make Louise feel more comfortable. So she goes to grab Kim, they walk back to her office, and when Kim walks inside, she just sees Louise standing there crying. I mean, this is an 18-year-old girl who is about to remove her clothes in front of her manager and in front of her coworker. It was just a horrible situation to be in, and Kim didn't didn't understand why this was happening. She starts asking Donna, why are we doing this? Like, is this okay? And Donna tells her that yes, she's on the phone with a police officer and with the McDonald's manager and with McDonald's corporate, and all three of them have approved of this strip search. And after hearing this, Kim complies. The two of them grab a garbage bag and they place it over the window of Donna's office door. That way none of the other employees and none of the customers can look through the window and see Louise taking off her clothes. After doing this, the strip search begins. Officer Scott tells Donna to first take Louise's car keys, take her purse, and then take her bag. After this, he tells Louise to remove one article of clothing. Louise starts off by taking off her shoes, then she takes off her socks, and then she takes off her shirt. Officer Scott then tells her to also remove her pants. Now, Louise was left only with her underwear and with her bra. At this point, I feel like Donna and Kim should have been like, this is it. Like, enough is enough. This girl is literally standing in her bra and underwear. Like, what else do you want? From this point, there was no reason why the search should have continued. I mean, honestly, the search shouldn't have even begun in the first place. But, seeing Louise standing there crying in just her underwear and panties should have been a sign to Kim and Donna that this needed to stop. I mean, did they really think that Louise was hiding a wallet and $50 inside her bra and underwear? I mean, it was just crazy what they were making Louise do, and unfortunately, it didn't stop there. Officer Scott then tells Donna that he needs her to remove Louise's bra and underwear. Why? Well, maybe Louise is hiding the money and the wallet inside of her underwear and inside of her bra, so they needed to check every single article of clothing before officially clearing her. Donna complies and tells Louise to take off her bra and underwear. After doing this, Louise is now standing inside of Donna's office naked. Kim hands her a black apron to use as a cover-up, but still, this is a completely humiliating situation. In what world do you think it's okay to have this young girl get completely naked in your office over $50? It was crazy, and Louise was thinking to herself, why is this happening to me? What's going to happen next? She was so scared, and she felt like she was completely alone and that she couldn't count on Kim or on Donna for help. She thought about maybe running away, but she was completely naked. All she had was this tiny black apron, so if she did want to escape, she would literally have to run through the back of the restaurant and the front of the restaurant completely naked. All of her coworkers and all of the customers would have to see her in this vulnerable place, and she just froze. On top of that, they had also taken away her car keys, her purse, and her phone. So Louise was pretty much stuck inside this office. So now that Louise was completely naked, Officer Scott tells Donna and Kim to gather up her belongings, put them inside a bag, and then go outside and take the bag to Louise's car. Once they put the bag inside the car, officers would swing by the McDonald's, they would grab the bag, and then bring it back to the station as evidence. At this point, it had been about 30 minutes to an hour since the search had begun, and Donna was starting to wonder, where are the police? Like I mentioned, the police station was literally only a mile up the road, so why has it taken them so long to get there? At this point, cops should have already been here, questioning Louise and, trying to figure out the situation. She also didn't understand why they needed to put Louise's things inside her car. Why couldn't a police officer just walk inside McDonald's and grab it from Donna? This just wasn't making sense to her, so she asked Officer Scott about this, and he tells her, don't worry about it, cops are gonna come soon, we're all really busy tonight, so we just need you to help us and help us do this investigation. You can do that, right? And Donna had always respected authority figures, especially police officers, so she tells Officer Scott that she's willing to help out until they get here. Now remember, all of this is going on while the restaurant is still running and customers are still coming and going. It was a Friday night, so things were getting busy, and Donna was the assistant manager, so she needed to get back out there and manage her employees and, just make sure that the restaurant was running smoothly. So she tells Officer Scott that she needs to take a break and that she can no longer watch over Louise. He tells her it's fine and that it would be very helpful if she could go grab another employee to come watch Louise while she goes to run the restaurant. So Donna goes out to the main floor and she grabs 27-year-old Jason Bradley. She tells Jason that she needs her help with something and brings him back to her office. She fills him in on the situation, and when he walked inside the office, he was completely shocked by what he was seeing. He saw Louise standing inside of Donna's office completely naked with just a small apron covering her up. He's so confused by the situation, so he grabs a phone and Officer Scott introduces himself and asks him if he can remove Louise's apron to see if she's hiding any money underneath the apron, and he also asks Jason to describe Louise's body to him. That's when Jason realizes that something is off. This is not something that a police officer would ask you to do. Why does he need to know what Louise's breasts look like in order to find the money? Like, how does any of this relate to each other? So Jason was immediately disgusted by the situation, and he tells Officer Scott that he's not going to follow his orders and gives the phone back to Donna. He also tells Donna that this is a really messed up situation, and Donna's like, okay, it's fine, you don't have to help me, you can go back out there, but just don't tell anyone else about what is happening. After Jason leaves the office, Donna tries to figure out what to do next. Kim is out on the floor helping to run things, and Donna also needed to get back out there, and at this point an hour had passed since Louise was back there, so she couldn't waste more time watching over Louise. So she tells Officer Scott, what do I do? And he asks her, is there a man in your life that you trust? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a fiance? Do you have a friend, a brother, anyone? Any male that you trust to come to the restaurant and watch over Louise? And Donna says, yes, I do. I actually have a fiance and I trust him. So Donna calls her 42-year-old fiance, Walter Nix, and asks him to come to the restaurant. Walter arrives at the McDonald's and he walks over to Donna's office, and that's when she fills him in on the situation. She tells him that he needs to sit back here with Louise, make sure that she's not hiding anything, make sure that she's not leaving, and to listen to anything that Officer Scott has to say. She hands Walter the phone and exits the office. Now, it's just 18-year-old Louise standing in Donna's office completely naked with a 42-year-old man. Now let's talk about Walter. He was an exterminator who frequently attended church and was a family man. He had 2 kids and was known to be a very kind and friendly person. He coached the youth baseball teams in the area, and his friends describe him as a community guy and as a great role model for kids. I'm not sure how long Donna and Walter were dating for, but they were engaged and set to get married. So Officer Scott tells Walter that he needs to take the apron away from Louise and check the apron to see if there's any money hiding inside. Walter grabs the apron, he checks it out, and doesn't find anything. However, before he hands the apron back to Louise, Officer Scott tells Walter to hang onto the apron and to make Louise perform a handful of exercises just to see if the money will fall out. So he tells Louise to perform jumping jacks, to shake her body, to run in place, to stand on top of the chair and spread her legs. He makes her do all of these ridiculous and completely humiliating things just to see if the money would fall out. And as she was doing these exercises, Louise was completely naked. She didn't have her apron on her, so she had to do all of these things in front of this 42-year-old man that she didn't even know. Now, while all of this was going on, Donna would frequently stop by the office just to check in on the situation. She would check in on Louise, on Walter, with Officer Scott, just to make sure that things were going along smoothly. And right before Donna would walk into the office, Walter would quickly hand Louise her apron and tell her to cover up. I'm assuming he didn't want his fiance to know that he was looking at this young 18-year-old girl completely naked and making her jump on the chair, do squats, do all of these crazy things. So anytime Donna walked into the office, Louise would be covering herself with the apron, and neither one of them told Donna about what was really going on. And please, let's not put any blame on Louise. I'm sure at this point she probably felt completely frozen. She had been inside this tiny, cramped office for a little over an hour now. She had been stripped down to her underwear and bra. Then she had to remove those items and was now left completely naked. So she was very vulnerable, and I'm sure at this moment she was probably just feeling numb and just didn't know what to do next. As for Walter, I have no idea why he didn't tell his fiance, listen, this officer is making me remove this girl's apron and is making me look inside her crevices and search her body. This isn't okay. But no, Walter didn't do that. Walter went along with everything that Officer Scott was telling him to do. There was one point when Donna walks inside the office, and this time Louise didn't have her apron on. She was standing next to Walter completely naked. Donna literally walks past her, goes to her desk, desk, grabs some paperwork, and then leaves the office. We're not sure if Donna didn't notice that Louise was standing there completely naked, or if she did notice and just chose to ignore it. Regardless, after that incident, Louise says she felt completely alone. She wasn't getting any help from Donna, she wasn't getting any help from Kim, she wasn't getting any help from Walter. She was completely alone in this situation, and she was scared to fight back. She was 18 years old, and this guy was 42 years old. He was a pretty big guy, so she was scared that if maybe she tried to run away, the guy would do something to her. So going back to the search, Officer Scott tells Louise that from now on, she needs to direct him and Walter as yes sir and no sir. If she didn't refer to them as sir, she would be punished. And the few times that Louise didn't follow his rules, Walter made Louise lay down on his lap, bend over, and he would spank her butt. I know, it's a lot to take in, but this grown man was spanking this 18-year-old girl all because someone told him to do so over the phone. He spanked her so hard that you could actually see red marks on her butt. How does any of this relate to finding $50? I don't understand what was going on through Walter's mind and how he thought that this was okay. Walter spanked her for over 20 minutes, and the whole time Louise was crying and begging him to stop, but he just didn't care. Now, the next thing that Officer Scott tells Walter to do is truly disturbing. He tells Walter to make Louise sit on his lap and kiss him. That way he could smell her breath and see if she had been drinking any alcohol or if she had taken any drugs. Which again, I don't know how any of that relates to finding the money. But Walter complies and he makes Louise sit on his lap and kiss him. Unfortunately, the abuse and torment did not stop there. Officer Scott then tells Walter to hand the phone over to Louise. Louise grabs the phone and Officer Scott tells her that she needs to get on her knees, unbuckle Walter's pants, and perform oral sex on him. If she refused to do this, she would be punished. She had been spanked for over 20 minutes just because she didn't refer to Walter or to Officer Scott as sir. So in her mind, she's thinking, if I don't do this, what is Walter going to do to me? He's already hit me, he's already spanked me, he's already abused me. So if I don't comply with this, I don't know what's gonna happen next. Louise was literally wondering if this was her last day on earth. So because she feared for her life, Louise complied. After being forced to perform this horrible thing, Walter realizes that he messed up. He realizes that this is wrong and what he did is bad. So he buckled up his pants, he grabbed his things, gave Louise her apron, handed the phone back to Donna, and just left the restaurant. He didn't tell Donna why he was leaving. He didn't say anything to her. He just handed her the phone and left. When he got inside his car, he called one of his friends and told them, I did something bad. Now going back to Donna, she was really confused as to why Walter had just taken off. Like I said, he didn't explain to her what just happened, and Louise didn't tell her either. I'm sure Louise probably felt embarrassed by what just happened, and at this point, she had been in the back office for about 2 to 3 hours. So she was just sitting there, covering herself up with the apron and feeling completely numb. Donna starts talking to Officer Scott once again and tells him, listen, I don't know why Walter just left, but I need to go back out in the front and run the restaurant. And she asks him, when are the police arriving? Like, are you actually coming or not? And Officer Scott tells her, yes, officers will be there shortly and this will all be over soon. So since Donna needed to go back out in the restaurant, she goes and grabs an off-duty custodian named Thomas Sims. She tells Thomas about what's going on and she tells him that he needs to help her watch Louise and wait till the police arrive. She brings Thomas back to her office, and when Thomas walks inside, he was completely shocked by what he was seeing. Donna hands him the phone and Thomas starts talking to Officer Scott. Officer Scott introduces himself and tells Thomas that he needs to remove Louise's apron and describe her body to him. As soon as Thomas hears this, he knows that this is BS. He tells Officer Scott that he's not going to do this and that he's going to call the cops. As soon as Thomas said this, the phone call ended. He hands the phone back to Donna and tells her that this is a fake cop and that none of this is real. And Donna is completely confused. She doesn't understand what he's talking about and she doesn't want to believe that this is fake. You know, she had just spent the last 3 hours holding Louise hostage in her office and had forced her to strip and do all of these horrible things. So she didn't want to believe that all of this was fake and that she had been scammed. So she decides to call Lisa Siddons, who was the manager at this McDonald's. Because remember, Officer Scott had told Donna that he had Lisa and a corporate representative on the phone and that they had approved of this strip search. So she calls Lisa and fills her in on the situation. Lisa tells her that she has no idea what she's talking about and that she's never spoken to an Officer Scott. That's when Donna realized that she had been scammed. This entire phone call was fake. She immediately begins asking Louise for forgiveness and tells her that she had no idea it was a fake police officer. She hands Louise a blanket to cover herself up and calls the police and waits for the real cops to arrive. Rookie detective Buddy Stump was sitting at home watching some TV when he received the call. His chief called him and said, "I need you to come down to McDonald's because something bad has happened. I don't know how to explain it, but you need to come down here ASAP." So he grabs all of his belongings and heads over to the McDonald's. When he arrives, he says that things were pretty chaotic. There were police officers all over the parking lot, and there were still customers inside McDonald's eating their food. Along with that, he also said he noticed that all of the employees seemed to be distraught. Some employees were crying and other employees just seemed angry. He starts making his way to the back office, and when he gets there, he sees this young girl wrapped in a blanket just sitting there with her head hanging down. He then was approached by assistant manager Donna Summers, and she explained the entire situation to him. And even after hearing the explanation, Buddy couldn't believe that this was real. He honestly thought that this was a joke, and he didn't understand how someone could have fallen for something so stupid. He was just so confused, but since the entire incident was captured on surveillance footage, he grabbed the footage, he sat down and watched the entire thing unfold. And after watching the tape for 3 hours, he was in shock. He had just witnessed this young 18-year-old girl get physically and sexually assaulted at McDonald's. He wanted to know exactly what happened directly from the victim, so he went over to speak to Louise, and as soon as he clearly saw her face, he realized that he actually knew her. Louise was his neighbor, and he was actually friends with her father. So after realizing that he knew the victim, this made the case even more personal, and he was now even more determined to catch this caller. Now, his first step was to go and arrest Walter Nix. In Buddy's eyes, he felt that Walter was just as responsible as the caller. He was the one who physically and sexually assaulted Louise, and he wasn't going to get away with it. So he ordered a couple of officers to go to Walter's address and bring him down to the station. In the meantime, Buddy was trying to figure out who could have done this prank call. At first, he thought that it might have been a disgruntled McDonald's employee. Maybe someone was recently fired and they had resentment towards McDonald's or towards Donna Summers and, wanted to get revenge. Then he started to think that maybe this was targeted directly towards Louise. Maybe someone was mad at her and wanted to, hurt her and decided to play this prank on her. There were just so many theories going through his mind, and before he could investigate those avenues, he first wanted to check to see if this had happened to someone else. So he logged onto Google and began searching. That's when he discovered that this wasn't the first time an employee had been strip searched. In fact, this had happened 73 other times in 31 different states. The first reported call came in 1995 in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. Then, a year later, there was another call made in Fallon, Nevada. The caller would pretend to be a police officer investigating a crime, and he would target stores in small towns and rural communities. He targeted areas where he believed people were more willing to trust an authority, especially in a police officer. He would call the stores and he would give a pretty basic description of the employee. So for example, he would call and say, "Oh, a customer says that an employee with black hair and brown eyes, stole her purse." And he knew that most likely there would be at least one employee that would fit that description. So after the manager would identify the employee, the caller would then go along with the story. So let's talk about some of these previous incidents. On November 30th, 2000, a caller persuaded a manager at McDonald's in Kentucky to remove her own clothes in front of a customer who was suspected of sexual assault. This caller wanted the manager to get naked in front of this customer just to see if this customer customer would attempt to molest her. That way they could actually prove that this customer was an offender. Honestly, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why the manager complied with this, but they did. Then on May 29th, 2002, a female employee at a McDonald's in Iowa was forced to strip and jog naked to prove that she hadn't stolen any money. In 2003, an assistant manager at an Applebee's conducted a 90-minute search of a waitress who was accused of theft. Then, in 2003, a manager at a Hardee's in South Dakota strip searched an employee. He made her remove all of her clothes and perform lewd acts on him, and he claims that he didn't want any of this to happen, but he was just following orders from a police officer. He actually ended up spending 40 days in jail before being acquitted of rape and kidnapping charges. Then, at a Burger King in North Dakota, a manager was told to slap a 17-year-old employee on her naked butt and was sentenced to 30 days in jail for disorderly conduct. And so on and so on. There were so many incidents across the country where things like this had happened, and I just think it's so crazy how people actually fell for this. On top of that, it was also crazy how the caller had not been caught yet. Police in those areas were just focusing on the managers that had conducted these, strip searches, but they weren't really focusing on the caller. And these managers defended themselves by saying that they truly believed that they were just helping the police. A lot of people saw them as victims, as someone who fell for this horrible prank. While some people did sympathize with the managers, most people didn't. A lot of these managers were fired from their jobs. A lot of them were divorced by their spouses and lost friendships over this. Some of them even spent time in jail, and it was just hard for people to sympathize with these managers because in their eyes, these managers failed to use their common sense. How did these managers believe that strip searching a young teenager was the right thing to do? Okay, sorry, I had to go put a headband on because this hair was just crazy. Anyways, back to the case. So after learning that this wasn't the first time that this had happened, Detective Buddy threw out the theory that this was targeted directly towards Louise or towards Donna Summers. He now thought that this was just a random attack. Now, thankfully, one of the employees at the McDonald's was thinking quickly, and as soon as the phone call had ended with Officer Scott, he had quickly dialed star 69. Now, when you dial star 69, it takes you back to the last known caller and gives you their phone number. So the employee quickly dialed star 69, and with that, they now had Officer Scott's phone number. Detective Buddy says that if that employee hadn't done star 69, he doesn't know where the investigation would have gone to because there would have been no way to track down this phone number. But thankfully, they did have his phone number, and Detective Buddy dialed the phone numerous times, but every single time, it would go straight to dial tone. So he called around to a couple of different phone providers to see if maybe they could help him track down whoever owned this phone number, and that's when an employee from AT&T told Detective Buddy that the man was calling from a prepaid calling card that had been purchased from a Walmart in Panama City, Florida. He calls the Panama City police detectives and asks them if they want to work together to solve this case, and that's when the detectives tell Buddy that he's not the only police officer looking into this case. A detective from Massachusetts named Victor Flattery was also working on the case. It turns out that this caller had also hit 4 Wendy's in the Boston, Massachusetts area. Detective Vic was assigned as the leader of a task force created to track down the caller. So this entire time, Buddy thought that he was the only detective working on this, but it turns out that he wasn't alone. Now he had a partner, someone who was just as driven and passionate as him to find this caller. So let's switch over to Detective Vic's perspective. He had been working on this case for some time, and just like Detective Buddy, he also thought that he was the only detective trying to track down this caller. He also discovered that the phone number used to call the Wendy's in Boston had come from a prepaid calling card in Panama City, Florida. So Detective Vic flies down to Panama City, he goes to the Walmart and asks them to look at the surveillance footage. He grabs a tape, he sits down at his office and watches the entire footage. There was so much footage to go through. He said that he literally got a headache from looking at the TV for so long, but he was willing to do whatever it took to track down the caller. He starts looking through the footage, and that's when he sees a white male between the ages of 30 and 40 years old purchasing a calling card. The surveillance surveillance footage was above the register, so you couldn't really see the guy's face, but you could clearly see the calling cards on the register. He starts looking through the footage to see if he can find a different angle that will clearly show the guy's face, and that's when he finds it. He finds footage of this guy entering and leaving Walmart, and you can clearly see his face and his entire body. This man was wearing black pants with a white stripe on the side, and as soon as Detective Vic saw those pants, he immediately knew that this guy was in law enforcement. That type of style of pants is normally what you would wear if you were a police officer. So Detective Vic grabs this footage, he grabs the photo, and he heads over to the Panama City Police Department and asks them if they recognize this guy. However, the Panama City Police Department says that they don't know who this is, but they do know that he's not a police officer. He's actually a correctionals officer. That uniform is the same uniform that correctional officers in Panama City wear. So Detective Vic grabs all of his things and he heads over to the correctional facility to look for this man. I mean, I'm telling you, Detective Vic and Buddy were so determined to solve this case. The amount of back and forth that Vic had to do between the police station in Panama City, between the Walmarts, between the correctional facility. I mean, this guy was driving all over the place. So he arrives to the correctional facility and he shows the image to the warden and asks him, "Do you recognize this man?" And the warden says yes. He identifies the man as 38-year-old David Stewart. Now let's talk about David Stewart. He was a father of 5 who had been married for 11 years. He first worked as a security guard at the mall, and then he worked his way over as a volunteer for the sheriff's deputy. After that, he drove a propane truck, and then finally he landed a job as a prison guard. His brother was a retired police officer, and David had tried to become one but was never able to. He worked at the correctional facility for about 11 months, and all of his coworkers describe him as a nice, normal guy. He was really into his family, he was good at his job. I mean, nothing really stuck out about this guy, so when his coworkers found out that he might be responsible for these hoax calls, they were shocked. So detectives bring David down into the warden's office, and Detective Vic starts the interrogation off by asking him, "Why do you think we're here speaking to you today?" David replies and says, "I don't know. Why are you here?" And Vic says, "We know you're the one that made the hoax calls. We know it's you, David." And as soon as he said that, he says that David started to sweat. He started to fidget around in his seat. He got nervous and immediately began denying all of these allegations. He told Vic that he had no idea what he was talking about and that he had never made any calls. Detective Vic tells him, "We have footage of you purchasing the calling cards." And he shows the footage to David, and even after looking at the footage, David still denies it. So since he continued to deny it, Detective Vic was able to get a warrant to go search his house. Police arrive at his home, they begin searching, and that's when they find a lot of police-related items. They found police magazines, they found police clothing, they found applications for police jobs. They just found so many things that pertain to being a police officer, even though David was not a cop. To detectives, it just seemed like David was obsessed with the idea of becoming a police officer. Now, along with finding all of these items, they also found a calling card. This was a key piece of evidence that Detective Vic and Buddy needed to nail the guy. So after finding the calling card, Detective Vic contacts the district attorney and tries to convince him to press charges against David Stewart. The DA's response to this wasn't too helpful. He agreed that yes, what David was accused of doing was a horrible and sick thing, but he just wasn't sure that there was enough evidence to convict David of a sex crime. Yes, he allegedly made the phone calls and commanded the managers to conduct these horrible things, but he never actually touched anyone. So to the district attorney, it was going to be hard to convict David. Detective Vic was feeling frustrated and he didn't want to let this go. So he called Detective Buddy back in Kentucky and told him, "Listen, you need to find a judge and a prosecutor in Kentucky that will press charges against David Stewart." Buddy starts calling around to different judges, and that's when he finally finds a judge that issues an arrest warrant for David Stewart. And on June 30th, 2004, David was arrested. He was brought all the way down to Kentucky from Panama City and was charged with solicitation of sodomy and with impersonating a police officer, both of which are felonies. His bail was set to $500,000. However, he hired a pretty tough defense attorney to defend him named Steve Romneys, and Steve was able to bring the bail down from $500,000 to $100,000. And with that, David was able to pay the bond and was released from jail. A couple of months later, in October of 2006, the trial began. There were news stations from all over the country outside the courthouse reporting on this trial. Everyone was shocked to learn that a married man, father of 5, was potentially responsible for all of these hoax calls across the country. It was a very big deal, and the police had done their job in tracking him down, and now it was up to the prosecutors to seal the deal. The trial begins, and David's lawyer, Steve, argues that what police are stating isn't really accurate. The only big evidence they had was the surveillance footage of David at Walmart purchasing the calling cards. However, his lawyer tried to argue that maybe it was David on footage, but maybe it wasn't. He asked the jury, "Can you 100% say that this man on footage is David Stewart? Besides the footage, what else did police really have?" Yes, they had the prepaid calling card that was found inside his house, but again, Steve tried to defend that and said just because he has a calling card doesn't mean that he was the one making the hoax calls. In his eyes, there was no way to prove that there was a connection. Steve said that there were no witnesses that saw David making these phone calls at a payphone or, making these phone calls at work or at his house. There were also no voice recordings of the phone calls, so there was no way to compare the voice recording to David's voice. On top of that, he also said that he didn't believe his client was smart enough to pull something off like this. He didn't think that David was bright enough or persuasive enough to convince these managers to do these horrific things. He 100% believed that police had caught the wrong guy. Now, as for the prosecutor's argument, they had tracked down all of the days the hoax calls were made and cross-referenced them with David's schedule. They concluded that the day these hoax calls were made, David did not go to work. So maybe instead of spending the day with his family, he had spent that free day making these hoax calls. And to that, David's attorney, Steve, argued that David did have an alibi for most of those days, and he just kept trying to remind the jury that David was a good person, he was a good husband, a good father, and that this wasn't like him. Now, during the trial, they did show the 3-hour surveillance footage to the jury, and this was a lot for the jury to take in. Everyone says that the room was completely silent for those 3 hours, and all you could hear were a couple of the jurors crying. It was a lot to take in, and after a few weeks of the trial, it was time to make a decision. After 2 hours of deliberation on October 31st, 2006, the jury came back with a verdict. They had found David Stewart not guilty. Everyone was completely shocked, and Detective Vic and Buddy just couldn't believe it. They had worked so hard over the past few months to track down this caller and get all of this evidence to nail the guy. And now the jury was just letting him walk free. They were shocked and just so disappointed. Now, something to note is that since David was arrested, allegedly, there have not been any more hoax calls. And that kind of makes you wonder why. Maybe after David was arrested and acquitted of all these charges, he stopped making the calls because he didn't want it to be traced back to him again. I personally believe that David was the one that was making these hoax calls, but definitely let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Now, the caller wasn't the only person responsible for this crime. In the eyes of the public, Donna and Walter were just as guilty. Donna was the one who had let the situation happen. She was the one who told Louise to get naked, and she was the one who called Walter to come into her office and watch Louise. Just because someone tells you to do something doesn't mean that you should do it. You should have that instinct to determine what is right and what is wrong, and in the eyes of the law, Donna was wrong. Donna was indicted on a charge of unlawful imprisonment, which is a misdemeanor. During her trial, she argued that she was simply doing what she was instructed to do so and that she wasn't a criminal. She did feel guilty for what had happened, and she says that this incident also destroyed her life. She was suspended from McDonald's and eventually terminated for what had happened. She also called off her engagement to Walter Nix, and she says she lost friendships over this. She was basically trying to argue that her life was just as affected. Donna says that she never intended for any of this to happen and that the only reason she went along with it was because Officer Scott sounded so real. He sounded like a real police officer. He had a very calm and authoritative tone. He knew what Louise looked like. He knew her hair color, her weight, her height. He knew that she was wearing a black tie. She says that all of these facts together made her believe that Officer Scott was a real person. She just had no reason to doubt him. Now, what the prosecutors were trying to argue is, how could someone fall for something so stupid? How could she actually think that a real police officer would make her remove a young girl's clothing and have her be naked inside her office, all because of $50. There were so many red flags that Donna should have caught on to, but she didn't. To a lot of people, it just didn't make sense how Donna had gone along with this. However, there was a professor of social psychology named Dr. Jerry Berger who came out and gave his opinion on the situation. He basically said, listen, I know the situation is horrible and that most of you say you would never fall for this, but never say never. He stated that it's human nature to obey orders no matter how evil they may seem. Another doctor named Thomas said that once you accept another person's authority, you become a different person. You are now concerned with how well you follow out your orders rather than whether it's right or wrong. In their eyes, something like this could happen to anyone because you never know how you would react to that type of authority. Honestly, I don't really know what to think of that because while yes, you never know how you will react in a situation, I feel like most people would take a step back and analyze the situation and think, is this the right thing to do? In the end, Donna took a plea deal. She entered an Alford plea, which is a type of guilty plea in which a person does not admit guilt but acknowledges that the evidence is sufficient enough for a conviction. So she made the plea and ended up getting a year of probation. As for her fiance Walter Nix, he was indicted on charges of sodomy and assault. His defense team argued that Walter was a good guy. He was a father of two, he was a community man, and this was just something bad that had happened to him, but that it didn't mean he was a bad person. Walter himself said that every moral fiber in himself was completely lost the day of the incident. He doesn't know why this happened. He doesn't know why he went along with these orders, and he says that he really regrets it. I just don't understand how he thought that making Louise give him a BJ was the right thing to do. Like, in what world do you think having her perform this relates to finding $50? I also don't understand why he thought it was right for him to spank her. I mean, everything that he did to Louise was absolutely horrible, and the jury agreed with that. They found him guilty, and Walter Nix was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The judge presiding over the case said, "It is absolutely amazing to me that anyone would commit these kinds of acts based on a telephone call." Now, even though David had walked free, Louise was still looking for some type of justice. If she couldn't get it in a criminal trial, then maybe she could get it in a civil trial. In 2007, Louise sued McDonald's for $200 million on the grounds that corporate head officers were aware that their restaurant was at risk for these type of scam calls, but failed to act on the threat. She believes that McDonald's failed in warning the employees about these hoaxes, and if they had done a better job at spreading the word, maybe this wouldn't have happened to her. All Louise wanted was for McDonald's to acknowledge that they had messed up and to apologize to her. Now, when McDonald's heard about the lawsuit, they were honestly pretty sassy about it. They said that the fact that Louise was asking for $200 million should prove to people what this case is really about, insinuating that all Louise really cares about is money and that she doesn't really care about what happened to her. They also put the blame on David and on Walter. David was the one who allegedly made the phone call, and Walter was the one who forced her to do all of these horrible things. So in their eyes, those two were the ones to blame, and McDonald's had no fault in any of this. Now, as for failing to notify the employees about these phone calls, McDonald's argued that they did notify them. They sent out memos talking about the hoax phone calls, and they warned the owners of the franchises and the managers about this. McDonald's was doing whatever possible to take the blame off of them, and at one point, they even started directing the blame towards Louise, the victim in this situation. They said that Louise was at fault because she failed to realize that Officer Scott wasn't a real police officer. They asked her, "Why didn't you run away? Why didn't you ask for help?" And Louise literally had to explain to them that she was scared for her life. She had been in this room for 3 hours. She had been spanked by this older man. She had been sexually and physically assaulted by him. On top of that, she was literally naked. She didn't have her phone with her. She didn't have her car keys. She didn't have her purse. She was literally isolated in this room, and it's horrible that McDonald's was trying to blame her for this. At one point, McDonald's even implied that Louise might have been in on the hoax and had planned all of this just to get money from McDonald's. They They actually put Thomas Sims on the stand. He was the maintenance man that had called the real police and had stopped this entire thing from continuing. They put him on the stand and he testified that he had heard Louise say that she was going to get a big check out of this. Now, it's possible that maybe she did say this after the incident occurred, but I feel like that doesn't really prove that Louise had planned this and was in on this. Why would she make herself go through all of these horrible things just to maybe get some money from it? Also, I have no idea if Thomas's testimony is real. You know, he could have lied for McDonald's. I don't know, but Louise's attorneys did poke holes in his testimony, and I just feel like it was a very odd thing to say and a very odd thing to accuse Louise of doing. Louise said that she had gone through so much after the incident. She would have nightmares every single night and she would avoid going to sleep because all she could think about was the incident. She had dreams that a man was attacking her and she would struggle to breathe. She had very bad anxiety, very bad insomnia, and she also suffered with depression. She said she felt very dirty after the incident and was questioning herself a lot. Honestly, my heart goes out to Louise and to all of the victims in these hoax calls. What they had to go through is absolutely horrible, and the fact that the caller has still not been caught yet is just so demeaning and just so infuriating. Yes, the managers and the people that did the assault are responsible for this, but so is the caller. So I feel like the fact that they haven't caught him yet just doesn't really serve much justice to the victims. The civil trial lasted just over 4 weeks, and in the end, the jury sided with Louise. She was awarded $5 million in punitive damages and $1.1 million in compensatory damages. So it wasn't the full $200 million that she was asking for, but at least it was something. McDonald's never once apologized to her. McDonald's never once acknowledged that they were at fault for this. They never said anything, and I know money doesn't fix anything, but hopefully this serves as some type of justice to Louise, and I just truly hope that she's doing well now and is living the happiest life possible. Now, Louise wasn't the only one who had sued McDonald's. Donna Summers also sued the franchise. She sued them for $50 million and claimed that they had failed to warn her about the previous hoax calls. She says that if they had done a better job to warn her, then this wouldn't have happened. And in the end, the jury awarded her with $1.1 million. I don't know, you guys. I just feel like it's hard to empathize with Donna because what she made Louise do and what she put her through is so horrible and so traumatizing. I just feel like it's hard to feel sorry for her and see her as a victim because, I don't know, I just picture myself in her position and I can't ever imagine going through with this. It's hard to empathize with her, but let me know what you guys think about that down below. It's crazy to me that David Stewart was found not guilty and is now free and out and about. Now, some people do believe that he was innocent and that there wasn't enough evidence to convict him, but other people believe that he actually is the caller and just got away with it. There was a movie inspired by this case called Compliance. I believe it's on Hulu, and it was a pretty shocking movie, to be honest. Just seeing a reenactment of what Louise had to go through is very haunting, and it just makes you so angry. There's also a 3-part docuseries on Netflix called Don't Pick Up the Phone. That series was pretty good, and you get to hear from Detective Buddy and from Detective Vic directly. So it was a very good documentary. I highly recommend you guys go check it out if you want to learn more about this. But alright, you guys, that is pretty much all the information I have for today's video. I know it was a very traumatizing and very bizarre case. I still don't understand how this happened, and again, my heart truly goes out to Louise and to all of the other victims involved. I hope people learn from this and they understand that just because someone tells you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's case, and before we end the video, let's announce today's Familia feature. Our Familia feature goes out to Pamela V. Thank you so much, Pamela, for being a member of La Familia and for supporting the cases and the victims that I talk about. If you guys want to be featured as the next Familia feature, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button down below. Thank you guys again so much for being here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys!